Storm Eunice batters the UK with powerful winds causing death, damage and disruption. Coastal areas in the south were buffeted by gusts and huge waves, and people urged to be cautious.
I don't know what the actual wind speed is, but you can barely stand up in it.
I'm literally at 45-degree angle. It's crazy.
The gale-force winds pulled down trees, tore through buildings and caused extensive damage in parts of the country. The extreme turbulence led to some bumpy landings, with planes buffeted even on the ground. And on the road, a lucky escape for a bus driver and passengers. But the storm has claimed 3 lives, and while the most severe weather has passed, there are still widespread transport delays, also tonight. More shelling in the breakaway eastern region of Ukraine. Both sides blame each other amid heightened fears of a Russian invasion. 2 years for manslaughter. The US police officer who mistook her gun for a taser and shot dead a young African-American man.
Wow! Great Britain are in the final!
Up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, stripped of Olympic silver, the men's 4x100 metre relay team lose their medals from Tokyo as CJ Ujia is found to have breached doping rules.
Good evening. One of the worst storms in decades, Storm Eunice, has torn through large parts of the UK, causing loss of life and major damage to some buildings. 2 rare red weather warnings, meaning a danger to life, were issued during the day but have now passed. In the last hour, a serious amber warning in place for a large part of England and Wales was also lifted, although less severe yellow alerts for snow and ice in northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland remain in place. The strongest gust of wind, blistering at over 120 miles an hour, was recorded on the Isle of Wight. 3 people were killed when they were crushed in their vehicles under falling trees. There was also widespread disruption with flight and train cancellations, school closures, power cuts in some areas and major bridges closed. Our first report tonight is from our correspondent, Danny Savage.
Cornwall was one of the first areas hit this morning. As Storm Eunice swept in from the Atlantic, the water was whipped into huge waves and coastal areas saw the highest gusts.
I don't know what the actual wind speed is, but you can barely stand up in it. So I'm guessing it's 80, 90 miles an hour on top of the cliff.
The sea state along the south coast was frightening. The Isle of Wight recorded a gust of 122 miles per hour. In Hampshire, a man in his 20s died when the van he was in hit a tree. The driver was also seriously injured.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it's falling over. Oh my gosh, whoa, oh my gosh. Whoa.
And it wasn't just trees falling. That's the spire of St Thomas's Church in Wells being destroyed. Near Bristol, a speed limit on the M4 Prince of Wales Bridge wasn't enough to keep traffic moving.
For what's thought to be the first time ever, both bridges here across the Severn Estuary are closed because of the high winds. But the severe flood warnings here have now expired. Thankfully, the worst case scenario wasn't realised.
Temporary flood defences were not tested, but authorities say it isn't over yet.
Today, as serious as it is, and it is really a serious, severe event today, but on the back of this, we've got more rain coming, so there could be possibilities of further flooding as the week pans out. So let's get today out of the way first, then let's make sure that all of our infrastructure, all of our defences are still in good shape.
As the day wore on, the storm headed east. For the first time ever, the southeast of England and London were also in a red warning area. In North London, a woman in her 30s died when a tree fell on a car she was a passenger in. The man who was driving was taken to hospital. A few miles away, the wind ripped off the roof of the O2 Arena, leaving a gaping hole. 1,000 people had to be evacuated from the site. In Merseyside, another passenger in a vehicle was killed. Debris blown in the wind smashed through the windscreen of a van, fatally injuring a man in his 50s. The north of England and parts of Scotland also had some heavy snow. This morning's rush hour was difficult, but things later improved. Storm Eunice will be remembered for its mountainous seas, wind damage and loss of life. A violent weather system which wreaked havoc across the British Isles. Danny Savage, BBC News.
In Wales, all train services were cancelled for the first time ever. The majority of schools were closed and tens of thousands of homes were left without power. Our correspondent Thomas Morgan has been speaking to some of those in the worst affected areas.
The sound will never, ever leave me. It was just heartbreaking to hear my daughter screaming.
Just before lunchtime in Newport, South Wales, Holly Price's house buckled under pressure from Storm Eunice, all as 5-year-old daughter Olivia was playing upstairs.
Opened the door, I could see all the houses, the roofs were hanging off, and I grabbed my daughter and managed to grab any clothes that we could that we had on and just take her outside. 3
homes condemned for now on this street, but thankfully nobody was injured. Elsewhere, the seaside town of Porthcawl also felt the impact, the majority of its coastline businesses having to shut.
The seafront here in Porthcawl really bore the brunt of the weather here this morning, as within an hour of the red warning coming into force, it coincided with high tide, meaning that waves came crashing over the promenade here.
I've lived in Porthcawl many years and I've never experienced it like this before. It's even taken my breath away, it's so windy.
At its peak this morning, gusts of over 90 miles per hour were clocked as Eunice turned over anything and everything in its path. For the first time ever today, all trains were cancelled as a precaution. Most schools also made the decision to close. Half-term started a day earlier than planned. Over 40,000 homes have been without power across Wales. And although the Met Office's red and amber warning have now come to an end, a yellow warning for wind begins tomorrow morning. The worst of Storm Eunice has now blown through Wales, creating dramatic and at times dangerous scenery on its way. Thomas Morgan, BBC News, South Wales.
Well, Storm Eunice has also caused travel chaos across the country. Planes have struggled to land at airports and gale force winds brought trees down on railway lines. Our correspondent Emma Simpson reports.
Would you like some water?
What they really want is to get home. Early evening at London's Waterloo station. Hardly any trains are leaving and there's nothing travellers can do.
Well, we've been here since about 12:30, so it's not looking very good.
Dare I ask, what's plan B?
We don't have a plan B at the minute.
We don't have a plan B at the minute.
It is what it is, it's not the railway's fault. They're probably trying to do their best and we've just got to be patient and wait and see, really.
At Banbury station, a roof flies onto the platform. Another roof landed on Carmarthen station too. This'll take some lifting. A track in the southwest. Another area badly hit. Fallen trees and debris have caused much of the rail disruption. Every train operator in England's been dealing with delays and cancellations.
There are trees down all over England and Wales. We've got thousands of colleagues out working with chainsaws and other specialist kit, desperately trying to get the railway open as quickly as we can.
It wasn't easy on the roads either. A narrow escape at Biggin Hill, south of London. There were no reports of any injuries. Travelling into a storm from the skies. Plenty of stomach-churning landings. This was Heathrow. And over at Gatwick, some pilots had to make several attempts. Across the UK, more than 450 flights have been cancelled today. Jane Anson was en route here, but didn't make it.
The pilot came on and said that there were no places to land in any of the other London airports. It wouldn't be possible to land there. They considered Amsterdam, but that was closed. They considered Edinburgh, but they said it was so snowy up there. So we turned around and came back to Bordeaux.
The going was rough on water too. A car ferry in Dorset on the final approach. At Dover, ferry crossings closed. The last boats to beat the storm tugged into safety. A precaution as the full force of Storm Eunice passes through. And here at Waterloo Station tonight, loads of suspended services, although a few trains have been leaving. The big picture from Network Rail is that they're going to be working throughout the night to try to clear the debris on lots of tracks, checking that they're safe line by line before the trains can run. So Reeta, I think this is going to be a gradual reopening. There's going to be more disruption tomorrow, not least because lots of trains are in the wrong place. And tonight there are problems on the London Underground and the Overground, yet more delays and cancellations. So the advice to travellers is check before you go, check before you travel.
Emma, many thanks. Emma Simpson there. Well, I'm joined now by the BBC's weather presenter, Ben Rich. Ben, just why was this storm so powerful?
Well, it really was every bit as powerful and as damaging as anticipated. The strongest wind gust at Needles on the Isle of Wight, 122 miles per hour, provisionally the strongest wind gust ever recorded in England. But plenty of other places had their strongest winds in 15 or 20 years. Now, the warnings for this storm came before it had even begun to form. But what's happened over the last several days is we've been watching this stripe of cloud on the satellite picture, a wave on that weather system picked up by a strong and powerful jet stream. The wind's high above our heads, blowing at more than 200 miles per hour, deepening that storm explosively, injecting energy into it and propelling it in our direction. But Eunice arrived quickly. It is clearing quickly now, clearing out into the near continent. For us this weekend, more weather systems pushing in from the Atlantic. There'll be more wet and windy weather, but it is not going to be as bad. It's still going to be wet and windy, not as stormy as it has been, but it is likely to hamper clear-up operations after Storm Eunice, a storm that is likely to live on in the memory.
Ben, thank you very much. And if you want to keep up to date with the situation where you live, you can listen to BBC Local Radio. The details are at bbc.co.uk/sounds. And for the picture out across the country, do head to bbc.co.uk/news. Now, there are fears this evening of a serious escalation in Ukraine, where there's been more artillery bombardment across the front lines in the east of the country. Kremlin-backed separatists have begun evacuating civilians to Russia, claiming they're about to come under attack from Ukraine, claims which Ukraine denies. The self-declared People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk have been fighting the Ukrainian army in the east for the past 8 years, in a conflict that has claimed more than 14,000 lives. The West fears that President Putin could use an incident in the separatist republics as a pretext to invade Ukraine. Our correspondent Orla Gearin has been to the frontline village of Trudivsky and sent this report.
An increasingly grim horizon in eastern Ukraine. We headed for the front lines where shelling has intensified, a prelude perhaps to much worse to come. The village of Trudivsky is in the line of fire. Emotions were raw just hours after shells rained down. Alexander Basilev is lucky to be alive. He was at home with his wife when a shell landed in their garden. They started at the hill, he says. The last shell fell here. Now all the mud is inside my house. The attack here was part of a flare-up along the front line today. The village is on Ukrainian soil, but some here sympathise with Moscow and put the blame on Ukrainian troops. They insist it was Russian-backed rebels nearby and say President Putin is laying a trap. We think it's a provocation, said Raisa, because there is shelling of civilian areas where there are no army positions. The enemy wants to provoke the Ukrainian army. The tension has been increasing here, and for communities living on the front line, the risks and the suffering are increasing also. The warnings about an invasion keep coming, but whether or not that happens, communities here are already trapped in a war of attrition. And across the front line, in the breakaway capital of Donetsk, sirens wailing after the authorities announced women and children would be evacuated to Russia. Separatist leader Denis Pushilin said the operation was arranged today, Friday the 18th, because Ukraine would soon attack. But a BBC analysis of the metadata shows this footage was recorded 2 days ago. Tonight, video has emerged showing small numbers boarding buses, apparently bound for Russia. The West has long feared that President Putin would use the separatist areas as a pretext for an attack on Ukraine. It looks like the stage is being set for something. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Eastern Ukraine.
Well, US diplomats say that Russia has now amassed up to 190,000 personnel around the borders of Ukraine, calling it the most significant military mobilization in Europe since the Second World War. Moscow has repeatedly denied planning to invade Ukraine. World leaders are meeting in Munich for a security conference, but Russia isn't attending for the first time in 2 decades. Our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette reports now from Munich.
The closest to war in Europe for years. These shots only fired in Russia's naval exercises in the Black Sea, but so close to Ukraine's southern coast and so much bigger than Ukraine's own fleet. A shot across the bow to Kiev. And a country now surrounded by Moscow's military might. On the northern border, another show of force. Exercises with Belarus. Today in Moscow, President Putin met the Belarusian leader, closest of friends. The long table used for visiting Western leaders is gone. President Putin tells him they'll both participate in new drills tomorrow and sends a message to NATO too.
I must state that these exercises are purely defensive in nature and do not threaten anyone.
A much different message here in Munich. US and NATO allies shoulder to shoulder, condemning what they call Russian aggression. No wonder Russia's foreign minister stayed away this year.
I think President Putin's been a little bit surprised at the way that NATO has come together. The European Union has come together. We've come together individually as partners. We come together institutionally. Either way, whichever path President Putin chooses, we'll be ready to respond.
One big question dominates this conference. Will Russia invade Ukraine again? The NATO Secretary General has seen the same intelligence as the US and British officials who believe it's imminent.
There's no certainty about the intentions of Russia.
But a high probability there could be something tomorrow, given what you've seen in the intelligence?
But what I think is very important now to just describe the facts. And the facts is that we have Russian armed forces amassed at the border of Ukraine that are ready to invade without any warning time. And that is a very dangerous situation.
In all this danger, there's still talk of diplomacy. And Russia releases images like this to claim it's pulling out its tanks, pulling away from this brink. But this crisis still teeters dangerously on the edge. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Munich.
Let's speak now to our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg, who's in Belarus, where, as we've heard, Russia is holding more joint military exercises this weekend. Steve, what are we to make of today's developments, particularly what's going on in eastern Ukraine?
Well, for days, Western leaders have been warning Moscow is looking to create a pretext for a military escalation in Ukraine, looking to manufacture a crisis. And what we're seeing now looks very much like a manufactured crisis. First of all, the sudden emergency evacuation of civilians from the rebel republics, then a car bomb in Donetsk, another shelling, and tonight Russian TV is reporting about Ukrainian saboteurs and sleeper cells. Question, is all of this scripted and directed by the Kremlin? It's starting to feel that way, certainly. And what of Vladimir Putin? Well, he showed no sign of compromise today, continuing to demand things the West has already said no to, like an end to NATO enlargement eastwards. It's possible all of this could be part of coercive diplomacy by the Kremlin, the most coercive diplomacy. But within the last few minutes, President Biden said he was convinced there would be a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Steve, thank you. Steve Rosenberg there. Here, the government's weekly coronavirus figures show a continuing drop in the number of cases recorded. On average, 46,990 cases were recorded each day in the last week. Hospital admissions have also fallen, with an average of 11,555 patients being treated in hospital over the last 7 days. 158 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, although some will have died of other causes. On average this week, 147 deaths were announced every day. Well, I'm joined now by our health editor, Hugh Pym. Hugh, it's a big day this Monday with an announcement on the future of COVID restrictions in England. What does this data point us towards?
Well, Reeta, a group of scientific modellers, part of the SAGE group of experts, has published its latest projections today, suggesting a continued fall in hospital admissions, perhaps to half of where they are now by early March, and a continued fall in daily reported deaths. And government sources think this is a pretty bright background to the set of announcements expected for England on Monday. Boris Johnson's already indicated that further legal restrictions will be lifted, including the legal requirement to self-isolate for those testing positive. It also seems as if there'll be an announcement on the winding down of PCR testing and the end at some stage of free lateral flow tests, so it's not quite clear when. There'll probably be exemptions for the more vulnerable. It's all part of what ministers see as a move to live with COVID, opening things up. But there's been a warning today from NHS leaders and that group of scientific modellers that trying to do things too suddenly could result in a rapid growth of the virus.
Hugh, many thanks. Kim Potter was making what she thought was a routine traffic stop in Minneapolis last year, but she ended up shooting dead the young black driver Dante Wright. She said she mistook her gun for a taser. Today she was jailed for 2 years, a penalty considerably below the state guidelines, as the judge cried when passing sentence. Dante Wright's family said it was little more than a slap on the wrist, as Barbara Pletasher reports.
This is one of the saddest cases I've
The case was about the killing of a young man and about a police officer of 26 years who made a fatal error.
I am so sorry that I brought the death of your son.
Kim Potter turned to the family as she begged for forgiveness. Dante Wright was a 20-year-old man of mixed race. Last April, police pulled him over in his car. He tried to flee, and Potter reached for her taser but grabbed her gun by mistake. He died later from injuries. The shooting triggered days of protests in a city on edge over the murder of another black man killed by police, George Floyd.
She took our baby boy with a single gunshot through his heart. She shattered mine.
Dante Wright's mother urged the court to hold Kim Potter accountable for taking a life. But the judge said this case was not the same as other high-profile police killings.
Officer Potter made a mistake that ended tragically. She never intended to hurt anyone.
Kim Potter murdered my son, and he died April 11th. Today, the justice system murdered him all over again.
A system that still sees justice in black and white, the family said.
This is the problem with our justice system today. White women tears trumps.
Wow.
Trumps justice.
Amidst growing outrage, the state's attorney general has urged everyone to accept the judgment. No one has won, he said. We have all lost. Barbara Pletasher, BBC News, Washington.
Great Britain have been officially stripped of the silver medal they won in the men's 4x100 metre relay at last year's Tokyo Olympics. It comes after the sprinter CJ Ujah, who ran the first leg of the relay, was found to have failed a drugs test. The 27-year-old says he unknowingly consumed a contaminated substance, which he will regret for the rest of his life. At the Winter Olympics in Beijing, Team GB is guaranteed another medal after the women's curlers followed the men's team and also won their semi-final match, beating the reigning champions Sweden. Andy Swiss reports from the Games.
A guaranteed medal and a place in the final, but goodness, what drama.
Eve Muirhead.
Sweden.
Like, what a moment. It sounds amazing to say that we're in the Olympic final.
Well, what a breathtaking talent Eileen Gu is, and what delight for the host nation. And with her second gold medal here in Beijing, she's proving...
Try to help her. You could feel this chilling atmosphere.
Back now to our main story, Storm Eunice. And as the worst of the storm hit Britain, tens of thousands were glued to Big Jet TV, a live YouTube stream of planes trying to land at Heathrow, as David Silito has been finding out.
It has been, shall we say, an interesting day to be an air passenger flying into Heathrow.
Easy, easy, easy. Go on, son. Oh.
And watching it all, and providing a live commentary on the extraordinary skills being displayed. Big Jet TV Live.
It has been a day to marvel at the skills of pilots as they've navigated these extraordinary winds, and following it minute by minute has been Jerry here on Big Jet TV.
It's been quite a day. This cockpit footage from Qatar Airways. 200,000 watched touchdown at the third attempt.
Bosh!
And in the cabin of this BA flight, you can feel the relief.
Very, very skilled individuals. This is where their training and their years of experience, even some, well, I'll say years of experience, some of them are sprogs, aren't they? They're young pilots who haven't been flying for very long, but you know, they do a great job.
Crabbing, looking in crabbing, man.
Crabbing, vectoring. Jerry's new viewers have been introduced to all sorts of new terms on a day when pilots have truly proved their mettle, and one that many passengers won't forget in a hurry. David Silito, BBC News, Heathrow.
Oh, yeah!
Oh, hard to watch. That's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good night. Bye-bye.